I've had a little series going, and I figured, there's another installment that I could make to it. And it's on the topic of, you know, what you can do when you have nothing left. You know, if nothing else, what can you do in certain situations? And this one talks about survival. If nothing else, you must simply survive. You must simply endure. Because the essence of survival is so linked to what it means to exist in the first place. Living beings, in order to go on, in order to continue, they must endure. They must endure nature. They must endure disease, lack of resources, injury, low motivation, etc. There are so many factors that are at play, and you must, in some ways, persevere in order to live on. So hearing it from that lens makes it sound rather, universal, as is something that we all must come to terms with. But on an individual scale, when we're talking a depressed, empty feeling individual, somebody that really, really feels low and life is just extra heavy for them, survival in that sense becomes a mechanism that truly is just about continuance. It's not even about creating an opportunity for the future. It's about literally surviving the present moment. Whatever the present moment brings, just trying your best to outlast it and trying essentially to not die under the pressure. So, it's at times burdensome, it's life, it weighs down on us, and we didn't ask for that pressure. We didn't ask for these particular conditions and circumstances that we find ourselves in. But yet, if we do desire any semblance of a future, we must trek on. We must, move our bodies forward. We must continue standing, else we would fall. Else we would lose everything. And so you'll find mostly that your instincts will crave, will burn, will force you to keep going. If you have any hope left, if you have any fire somewhere in that soul, you will keep on. Because that's the only thing you can do in that moment, So you don't have to concern yourself with, happiness and relaxation and comfort and bliss, enlightenment. No. Those are conditions that are afforded to those that have met the majority of their hierarchy of needs. And when we're talking about the most primitive of needs, the ideas that are at the top don't even apply anymore. So that's what we need to remind ourselves, is that when you are truly in that life or death situation, meaning, on a psychological level, you truly have nothing else to offer except, carrying out your bodily functions, your basic mental, capacities, in an effort to just, break through the current circumstances. that in itself is survival. Now, it might not be, the truest form of flight or fight, you versus another person or an animal, or even, out in the middle of the desert, but it's the psychological warfare. It's being under the thumb of life, being pressed down and pushed to your limits. And some people then will find spirituality, and some people will find peace in the process. However, if you're at all familiar with the instinctual nature that is flight or fight, you'll know that, in high stress situations, typically spirituality is the last thing that comes to mind. I think people often forget that, The first thing that's abandoned is those, higher planes of consciousness, because they do not protect you from, immediate, ostensibly, they do not protect you from immediate perceivable, rapid stimuli, things that are changing quickly, things that are purely based off of your reflexes. That is more of a mental and body response. And emotions are not quite as impactful there. Spirituality, in most cases, is not quite as impactful there. And not to say that it doesn't help, because sure, being grounded and being, at ease, even with the suffering, it helps tremendously. But in terms of the raw adaptation on a very, very extreme and quick level, I think it really comes down to, you are in a survival mindset. Sure, you can call it low frequency. Sure, you can call it, instinctive, but primal. But it's just a very human response to, extreme suffering. So I don't think it's necessarily something to be picked apart and criticized, because I think almost any person on this planet, if they found themselves in the same position, would realize that, really all you can do is survive. When true shit hits the fan, all you can do is fucking survive and make sure that you got your shit together. Of course, again, you do want to keep a calm demeanor, because that's going to keep you level-headed and hopefully align yourself with more rational choices, which will typically get you at least into a closer potential for something to go well and in your favor. But in terms of, just depending on, your belief fundamentally that it's going to get better without the precautions and actions that, necessitate surviving inherently, I don't think that you can expect, extreme change. So when I say, if nothing else, survive, I mean, do what it takes. Live, continue, persevere, keep going, endure, don't die. And that is something that requires both passive bodily processes, mental processes, and slightly more active, perhaps psychological and spiritual decision making, so that everything aligns to keeping you standing and not dropping dead, that everything keeps you on your feet and moving forward towards wherever it is that you would like to go. once the storm passes. So I hope that's helpful in some ways. I hope that somebody can take some inspiration from that. And thanks for watching.